One last time live before Penn State football takes on Illinois this weekend. This is BWI Live. That's not even true. We've got a tailgate show that's coming up at 4:30 on Saturday. But the last time this assembled group of experts will be talking with me, I've got a different expert for that day. Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz are recruiting insiders who are going to take you through the important names and faces and photos that they're going to be gathering this weekend of who's going to be at Penn State for the first primetime game of the 2024 season. Ryan, is this the first real game with juice as far as recruiting goes for the Nittany Lions? And were you expecting that when we started the month of September?
Well, whenever you have a night game, right, which sure wasn't announced as a night game until a little bit ago, but it's, I think, been kind of known. I mean, Brett McMurphy put out a tweet, in May, this was likely going to be an NBC night game. And I think when you kind of get that info out there, that helps recruiting staffs sort of plan. You never know how it is. But I did always kind of think that this would probably be one of the better lists, really, maybe of the whole season, just because of, UCLA's at noon. And then obviously we'll get into November and, the whiteout in Ohio State will be great list. Don't get me wrong, but there's playoffs, and when you get into early November, a lot of high school playoff games are Saturdays. You have to see where things go. But no, it's certainly shaping up to be a good list. I think that Bowling Green list was actually better than I expected, looking back on it, or at least going into that visit weekend. But yeah, certainly better than Kent State, and will likely be better than UCLA.
Fitz, what are you thinking there?
For Chad said we should talk about how Nate is wrong behind his back. I love that segment. Everything about Bowling Green has been better than expected. Bowling Green is better than expected. It's really interesting to take a listen to some of the national shows talk about Penn State and then talk about Bowling Green as if Bowling Green was something that, was just a buffed up version of Kent State. And it's really interesting to see the difference. I think Bowling Green's better than West Virginia. Like, I think they beat them. Like, that's just the way that I saw those two teams. And it's interesting just from a team perspective, how little respect Bowling Green gets. Bowling Green's now, I think, plus 250 to win the MAC. They're the favorites to win the MAC. And I think if they keep it up and obviously stay healthy and keep throwing to that mutant they've got at tight end, that's awesome. Then they'll be fine. But it's been very interesting to see the discourse of who looks at the games and who looks at the box scores and who looks at the brand names on the opponents. And it's been very different to see how people have responded to West Virginia versus Bowling Green, because again, I think Bowling Green is a better team. So it's just an interesting mention there by Ryan that sort of ticked off something in my brain. But yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll be getting to more of Fitz's thoughts here on the show. Of course, if you want an unending number of Fitz's thoughts, and if you want to get some of those about Penn State football and practice last night, the number one way to do that is to subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We've got an awesome deal for you. Promo code WEARE, 50% off an annual membership. That means it's like $60 for a full year of coverage at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm not going to do the math on how many cents that is a day, but that is as good of a deal as you're going to get for this big game. It will not last forever. So if you want to know practice updates, we're going to be getting into some of those coming up next, but not all of them. Again, promo code WEARE for 50% off at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. To start, James Franklin had his press conference last night. Fitz and I were there to take in everything, and we're going to start off with this particular conversation from Franklin. He took a question about Anthony Speca and co-opted it into something that's perfect to start our show with.
Played at a great high school in terms of Pittsburgh Central Catholic. Those guys have come in here prepared and ready to play. I think the academics at that school helps prepare them, even from a football perspective. We can't get enough Pittsburgh Central Catholic guys. Looking right into the camera. We can't get enough Pittsburgh Central Catholic guys.
So guys, who's he talking about? Ryan, we'll come to you because we're going to be talking about practice next. So I want to get you here on the show. Who's he talking about, and who's he making the pitch to there?
Well, he already has one committed, Xavier Thomas, a really good-looking cornerback who's playing really well right now. But I think he's directing that at Bradley Gumpers, of course, who we've discussed here, I think once or twice here in recent weeks. Tight end, linebacker, athlete, whatever you want to call him. I think he'd lean a little bit more towards a true athlete linebacker card with him at the moment. But obviously, he's really taken off this season, playing great football right now. And yes, he's still committed to Duke, and we'll see, whether that sticks, whether Penn State can get him on campus. I'd be surprised if Penn State doesn't get him on campus once during these upcoming games. As of now, I don't believe he'll be here this weekend. I think he's actually going to Duke. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But Penn State's certainly pushing really hard with the 6'4", 215 athlete who's doing a little bit of everything for Central Catholic right now. And hey, the other thing is they've got a lot of young guys too that keep rolling through that system. So not just this year, but I think down the road they'll keep pushing hard at that school.
Yeah, Fitzy talked about the best schools in the state, and I know that Philadelphia gets a lot of the eyeballs and attention for some of these players that maybe go to a national level, but Pittsburgh Central Catholic has put out some pretty good football players over the years.
Yeah, if you remember when we talked to Chuck Losley over the summer, like that was his thing about Pittsburgh Central Catholic kids, Speca and Peter Gonzalez, was they came in ready to go prepared, and you didn't have that as much from some other schools. I mean, Pittsburgh Central Catholic has advantages that other schools don't have, no doubt. But at the same time, it's a mindset. It is the academic profile. It is all those different things that they do so well there that has prepared them for everywhere. I think, Cole Sullivan went to Michigan. I think he was prepared to come in and play. I'm not sure where his stats are if he's gotten in the games, but, just those guys that you've seen come out of that school are really prepared. And, there's a conversation to be had of how far into their ceiling are they? How much do they have left to grow versus, a guy like Tyseer Denmark and Kenny Woosley from Imatep who don't have those same advantages. But at the same time, if you come in ready to go, Speca showed last week that he can play. Gonzalez was, I think, on the track to maybe cracking something. Like I have a tough time seeing freshmen coming in and making some waves, but he was going to do some things in camp, or he had done some things in camp that people were like, okay. And then you see his size and his speed, and he can play on special teams. Like those are the types of kids that they're looking for, and Gompers is in there. I saw that this morning. Xavier Thomas had 3 touchdowns last week. And that's, he's a really, really good player. He's probably the guy that Ryan, would you say he's the guy we've talked about the least in the class so far? Like it's
for sure.
Probably
keeps to himself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Troutman for a while.
Right.
Go ahead.
He keeps to himself. He committed at a time when it's like, okay, well, everybody's getting over the wave of guys that just signed. He committed the day after signing day in December, and nobody really thought twice about it because he hadn't reported an offer, even though he had an offer for a couple of weeks before that happened. So did it very low key, didn't do a ton of interviews. But yeah, he's a guy that's like, okay, he's got his brothers in the NFL. He's a guy that I think they hope may grow a little bit more, but for the time being, they're pretty happy with him as a slot corner, as a corner altogether. And I know we're showing Gompers highlights, but Xavier Thomas has been a real surprise. And if you talk to a lot of people in Pittsburgh, this is a guy that can come in and, I don't know if play right away, but like he's got a really good base skill set to work with.
When you have guys that have that physical maturation at the high school level, that have an understanding of how to lift and how to get better. I think we even had the conversation when it came to Bo Prabula and Drew Aller. If Bo came in with a little bit more of a physical understanding of the weight room, not to compare those two on, but that's kind of the conversation of, if you have to learn how to lift weights in high school, you are just slightly behind guys who have that sort of professional approach in high school. And Pittsburgh Central Catholic guys, they have been pretty impressive from the physical development standpoint and also the mental development standpoint, as Franklin talked about. Anything else interesting there from that particular conversation and how it fits? It seems like Franklin has been using more of these opportunities to send pointed messages to recruits. Do you think that's fair, or is this just kind of a reoccurring thing that pops up every once in a while?
It's absolutely fair. I mean, he knows what he's doing here. Like he did it earlier this week, and you read that on BlueIllustrated.com. It was a little bit more coded, but at the same time, not at all. But this one was like looking straight into the like he found your camera and was like, yeah, we love Pittsburgh Central Catholic guys. We need to get more Pittsburgh Central Catholic guys. And he's done it before. It's funny when it happens, especially for when you talk about a class of 2025 that's only got a handful of guys that are still on the board, most of them flip targets, but like it's just really interesting how you can see their methods play out when he uses his words. But it's nothing new. He's done it before, but at the same time, it's really like, hey, that stuff. I don't want to say it matters in the grand scheme of where you sign, but like it gets your attention certainly if you're a prospect.
Today,
hey,
this
one
show,
last thing. Can I add one thing real quick?
Sure.
Am I lagging? I hope I'm not lagging.
Yes.
Anyway, only St. Joseph's Prep has more NFL players from Pennsylvania than Central Catholic right now. And over the years, Central Catholic has 15 NFL players, from their high school. So I just think it speaks to a lot of the program's history, what they've been able to do. And obviously, Prep has produced a lot of Philadelphia talent over the years, but Central Catholic is not far behind with 4 guys currently in the NFL.
I think it's important, too, to have that sort of balance in the state so that it's not all on one side or the other. Speaking of balance, your life needs to have balance with work and with your personal life. And Andy Ludicky at myperfectfranchise.net, that's what he's all about, because he started in corporate America. He was traveling. He was never around his family. And he wanted to change. So he bought into a franchise himself with management under his belt, that experience, that understanding of corporate life. And he started to diversify, find what he was good at, and find the businesses that worked for him. Along the way, things didn't work out. He had businesses he had to sell. He had opportunities that didn't happen, and he had to adjust and adapt. He's taken all of that knowledge and distilled it into his course, myperfectfranchise.net. You can give him a call at 404-973-9901 or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net if that sounds like you. He's trying to help people that he knows. Again, things he knows, people he knows. He is a message board lifer. He's been with On3 since the very beginning. So we love supporting him as he supports us through this journey. So if you love sports and you love recruiting, that's why he's on this particular show, because he is a recruiting fanatic. You have to forgive him for being a Texas fan, but I'm sure that you guys can get over that and find other things to have in common. Check him out and his ability to get you into the next stage of your life, whether it's you want to diversify, build wealth, or leave a legacy for your family. The American dream is about control over your destiny and being able to rise through the ranks. And if you want to have control of your life, check out Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Thanks to him for supporting the show. Guys, the game this weekend, I was surprised going over to Gametime, the Gametime picks. One thing that's great about Gametime is we all like to save money. We all like to get the best deal possible. $35 for tickets to this game. I was shocked by that. I don't know if you've been looking around at anything. Have there been, when you've been on Gametime, have there been prices that have shocked you? Because every single time I look at this, and I'll just show you here, there's always something I'm like, really? $35 for 2 tickets to go see a primetime game in Happy Valley.
I was surprised because UCLA, I think, is more expensive. And I think that was off the cuff. Penn State labeled that as a premium game and did not label Illinois as a premium game. So really, this is your chance to get to a premium game that's not premiumly priced. Premiumly, that's probably not a word. But no, it's a really good opportunity. And like I said, if you peruse the app, if you look there, you can find steals. And especially leading up into Gametime, it wasn't on purpose, but leading up into Gametime, that's when you find the best prices, because they have their dynamic pricing, which changes as you get closer to the game. So it's an opportunity to get there. I wouldn't trust cell service on Saturday in State College, but if you find some Wi-Fi on Saturday afternoon, probably a good place to look at Gametime app.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. They've got good deals on good sections too. They show you, I know everyone likes to be in the blue back seats. These are for some pretty decent prices. You can literally price shop here. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, on their app, or here on the site that I'm showing you, you can check all that up. But the Gametime picks, that helps you filter to the best deals possible, which is super awesome. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can't go crazy with it. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Guys, what time is it? Is Gametime. It's also time to talk about Penn State practice from yesterday and what we saw. Fitz, I always let you go first as the honored guest, the expert on the show. Also, offense has become pretty boring. So what did you see from the defense out there? Because I know there are some important people that we were trying to keep track of, and there's some important things going on defense. So what did you see last night with the Nittany Lions defensive practice field?
I don't know that offense has become boring, because I know you were chomping at the bit to say some of the stuff you couldn't say.
Yeah, I can't. There's so much stuff that I know. I can't talk about it.
Yeah, sounds very boring over there. But those are rules put in place for a reason. So
Yeah.
like that's tough. Defensively, you see a lot of the same things, but you see some of the talking points that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks sort of play out in front of you. Of course, linebacker depth always an issue. Dom DeLuca not there on Wednesday night. Not a complete surprise. He left the game against Kent State and was not given back his helmet. So like that'll be something Penn State has to deal with. We talked to Kobe King after practice. He talked about Anthony Speca and Dakari Nelson potentially filling in. That to me seems like you're skipping a step there because you still got Elsdon, and I know how people feel about Elsdon, but you still got Elsdon, you've still got Tamir Robinson, you've got safeties, you got corners to work around. So filling that spot is kind of like the conversation we had with KJ. Filling that DeLuca spot is going to have to come from a sort of a supplement of every position. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. But after practice, James Franklin did say, hey, Anthony Speca, his role has been elevated. Now, does that mean he's a full, you're going to see him out there a lot? He led the team in tackles last weekend, but of course, a lot of late time against Kent State does not equal prime time against Illinois. But still, like you watch you watch the coaching from Dan Connor, you see the difference in, hey, Speca picks this stuff up really quick. He's a sharp kid. He knows what he's doing. And that's half the battle right there as a young player, to know where you're going to be. Whether you can finish or not, that remains to be seen. And that's a spur of the moment type thing. But if you're in the right spot, odds are you're going to finish more than you're not going to, or more than you're going to miss. So we'll see what happens with him. You've obviously got a hole at the Sam. Dakari Nelson was running in there last night, but I still think that's a work in progress. I think that's a situation where you see the size and you see the high school accolades and things like that and think, okay, well, maybe it's just a switch that can come on. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that with Dakari Nelson.
Can I just jump in here too of, graded these guys, graded being watch the film on them, and Speca and Nelson particularly looked pretty good in that second half against Kent State. But I think it's important also to mention that they're not running the game plan at that point necessarily. They're running the Penn State defense. They're running some of the very simplified versions of, hey, here's the defensive call so you can play fast. And also Kent State is not running the majority, I would say, of their game plan at that point. So those are the context things of saw Tamir Robinson against like the full force when he came in the first half, made one mistake on one play, but it showed the difference between later when things were a little simpler and he was able to play pretty fast and effective. So some of those, you keep those things in context. If you were excited about Jalen Harvey or Dakari Nelson or Anthony Speca last week, mastering the basics is great, but there will be a harder level against teams running their game plan if these guys have to play this coming weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of how that's tilted, isn't it? Just you look at guys like Granville and Harvey and, oh man, they provide something big off the edge. Well, I mean, it's kind of a different when you're playing third quarter, fourth quarter against Kent State. And unfortunately, I don't know if everybody saw it, but Kent State's top two quarterbacks are now done for the season after last weekend. So that's awful.
Yeah.
But otherwise, back to Penn State, I mean, you've got a situation where you sort of mix and match and see what you can do. We talked again about KJ replacing KJ, but Dejon Lane seems to be, they're pushing him in that direction. I don't know if they're going to get there, but they're pushing him in that direction. They're pushing some corners all around and doing some things that are a little bit different. It'll be interesting to see this weekend against Illinois because they, rely so heavily on the perimeter, whether that's at the line of scrimmage or a little bit down the field. How much man, how much zone, how much is working to beat Altmaier's first read, second read, and then what happens after that? Because if you can take away that read, all of a sudden you can get to the quarterback. Because I think, again, we're going to put it on repeat here. They're going to try and get rid of the ball as soon as they can. Like that's is not a secretive blueprint in terms of defeating Penn State's pass rush or anybody's pass rush is to hold the football. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that comes about. But yeah, pretty much status quo. Jalen Harvey was pulled up with the travel squad. I thought that was cool to see. And you're wondering, are they going to balance that? We talked about 4-4, how to keep those red shirts on those guys. But if you need them, play them.
Yeah. Yeah. And Matthew John says Jalen Harvey big enough to play some snaps. Yes.
It's not the size. It's not about the size with Harvey. He's 250 pounds. Somebody correct. I said 260 earlier this week. I think he got big and then he took some weight off, which is probably necessary, but he's got some nice burst. And, it's one of those guys, if you can sprinkle him in, if you need him for a couple of plays, sprinkle him in and that can work. And same with Granville. And now you're 3 games into the season. So you've got 9 games left. You've got 6 games left to use those guys. So it makes sense if you're going to need them, barring an injury to somebody above them on the depth chart, that you can, sort of intersparse them.
Yeah. from an offensive perspective, some of the things I noticed and some of the things that were interesting, some of them made it to the Blue White Illustrated message board on our live updates, which is another reason you should subscribe to bluewhiteillustrated.com, because we give you immediate updates and feedback of what we're seeing and what the things are in some context. Then we write about it a little bit later. So that's the first place to go get it, is subscribe right now. You can get some of those details on the message board. But from a general sense, the thing that I think everyone was expecting, Cam Wallace wasn't there, and Quentin Martin was number 3 through the line with the running back. So that's the situation we're expecting for this weekend. But James Franklin obviously didn't have any update on Cam Wallace or on Dom DeLuca yesterday after practice. And then the other thing was, I had a terrible time, Fitz, with the receiver numbers. They were all over the place yesterday. There was a number 4 out there. It wasn't Tysier Denmark, because, of course, I think it's Bryant for one of the starting receivers for Illinois wears number 4. But Tysier Denmark was wearing number 7, who doesn't, I think he maybe has 1 catch this year, but he's their special teams. Like, it was just all over the place with the receivers. But Tysier Denmark specifically was not wearing his number 4. So that was the main thing of who's on the depth chart and who's on the D squad, or who's being used as emulating the other players this week.
Right. It's always fun to watch that, because you would think, Denmark might be a super slot guy, but you look at Illinois and they don't do a ton out of the slot. It's mostly those outside guys. And if you look at their numbers, how they're balanced, I mean, you got 2 receivers that have over 20 catches, and I think the number 3 guy has 5 catches. So there's no secret about who they want to get the ball to.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, they don't use a ton of slot play. They rotate through a lot of slot players, but they don't use it as much as Penn State has, where they've attacked the slot quite a bit. We're going to get to some of that stuff in our game preview and predictions at the end of the show. But Ryan has been doing a great job of being on top of the list that Penn State has coming this weekend. And there's a lot of interesting names already. Ryan, I know you're working on some stuff as we speak. So
literally, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So bluewhiteillustrated.com. One more shameless plug for joining us on the site. But let's go through some of the names on the list that we've already talked about this week. Where do you want to start the bidding? Who's interesting from a prospect perspective?
Well, we're over 30 confirmed players right now, and I think we could probably get that up to closer to 40. Hopefully by the end of the day into tomorrow. Got a bunch of fishing lines out there, we'll say, working on some players at the moment. As far as who to start with, I think it's very interesting that there are multiple guys from California coming in, because you don't, we've seen it before when, Modern Day is playing St. Francis, right? And they're all, already on the East Coast. We saw that last year with a couple of guys, but it's kind of rare to see 3, 4, different families, different schools, not really even on the same 7-on-7 team or anything like that, all make the trip out for one individual game. And I think if you're going to start with
clarify, this is not a 7-on-7 team. These are individual players that are coming out.
Correct. Yeah, wow. Correct. So, and that was one thing I was really trying to work on yesterday too, because I was like, man, all these Cali kids, like, there has to be some sort of connection here. And all of them said they're coming individually with their families. But I think the guy that will probably grab the attention of fans maybe the most is Madden Williams from St. John Bosco, 6'2", 185 wide receiver. Where he's at on Penn State's board right now, I think we'll have a better feel after this weekend. I would still have a couple other guys ahead of him at the moment. But the fact that he's visited twice before, coming back again this weekend, I mean, he's got a stacked offer list with Texas and Oregon and, all types of, prominent West Coast programs. We'll see. I think Ohio State he's mentioned as a school that's pretty high on his list as well. But the fact that he's coming back for a game, middle of the season, it's not easy to fly out here and fly back in a 48-hour span, which Greg and Nate will get to know later in the year when they go to USC. I was talking with Greg about that the other day. But I think he certainly has my attention. But honestly, there's another California player that I think we're going to be maybe talking about a good bit. 2027 offensive lineman Lucas Rowe. I think it's Lucas Rowe. I got to clarify exactly how to pronounce his last name. But what's interesting here, first off, let's start with the fact that he's a top 50 prospect already. He was part of On3's first 100 players in that class to get an early 4-star rating. But the more I've dug on him, he's actually pretty familiar with Penn State. Dad went to Penn State. He says aunts, uncles, cousins all went to Penn State. A lot of family in central Pennsylvania. Okay. Learn that. Let's keep digging. Grandma worked at Penn State, then retired from Penn State. Okay, let's keep digging. kept on digging. Went to the last 2 Rose Bowls. Also went to the Fiesta Bowl back in 2017. So this is a family who's obviously has really strong ties to Penn State. They grew up diehard Penn State fans. And here we are talking about a top 50 prospect from California who, is very excited about the Nittany Lions and the opportunity to potentially play for them. I guess 2027, Sean, I know we got to see how these guys stack up. Long way to go. Players will pop up and drop in different rankings and really on the staff's board, most importantly. But this is a player who has extremely strong ties and now is out in the Orange Lutheran program who plays in that stacked Trinity League that we talk about all the time. It's arguably the best high school league in the entire country. So just curious to see his development, see where things go. Obviously, see how this weekend goes, of course. But he was here in March to watch spring practice. Again, talked about all those family ties, the fact that he's been going to Penn State games his whole life. And again, I'll stress again, it's early, but right now he's considered one of the top 5 interior offensive linemen in the country.
Fitz, the primetime 7:00, because I don't know necessarily how the rest of the schedule goes from that particular perspective, but with it being a 7:30 kick, does that give these guys more time to get here? And is that why this game is, if you're considering going to a Penn State game, this is the one you would go to? Yes.
So it kind of sucks because they just announced the game time last week. Now Ryan's been saying this. Ryan's very he doesn't want to throw everything out there, but he's been right on every game time so far, and he's been pegging this one as a night game since I think before Brett McMurphy was. So he won't say that, so I'll say it. So definitely check it out. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is the place to find that stuff out. So we've been planning on this as a night game for a long time. But if you're in those shoes of a high school kid who's not, or a high school parent more so, who's not in tune with the people that are on our message board, it's tough to turn that around in a week and a half. So to see all these guys coming out from California, yes, there was an inkling that this was going to be a night game for a long time, but that's hard to make plans like that. But yes, it giving them more time, or giving them the 7:30 time, especially it's actually more helpful for the guys in the region. If you're coming in from California, great. Maybe you take a red eye, get here on Saturday morning or something, and that's a tough turnaround. But at the same time, it's doable. Guys in the region, if you have a noon kick, you're leaving your house really early. You're maybe missing Saturday film. You're maybe missing something like that. This gives you the opportunity to get here. So I think it's actually more impactful for regional guys that can get out here for 7:30 games. And plus, that's better if you're Penn State, because where does the bulk of your class always come from? It comes from the region. So
right.
I think that's more helpful. And plus, flying into State College, not always on time, not always the easiest. So a little bit of a buffer helps everybody.
Yeah. And that was I came to you because you are our State College regional airport expert on these things. So I was curious of how all of that would work from that perspective. Do you have another player you're interested in from the list that you want to highlight here, as I'm desperately trying to upload the highlights of all these players, because somehow I didn't get that into the rundown, even though I spent an hour doing it?
Ryan and I had a back and forth on the board yesterday. It's too early to talk 2027 offensive line recruits, because these guys change so much, and because these guys that are so big so early don't always make that transition. Roa seems to be a guy that looks pretty good early. So does Leighton Von Brandt from Delaware. He's a guy that's been at camp several times, a couple times. We've seen him in person. He looks good. We'll see how these things go about. I remember a couple years ago, Ryan, it was Antonio Tripp, Chase Basantis, and there was another guy, and they were and we were talking really early in the cycle. And we're like, okay, these 3 are going to be Penn State's core for this offensive line class. And then, that didn't happen. So, and Tripp was a guy that kind of moved away from. Basantis obviously has been fantastic at Texas A&M. Ryan, find me that third guy, because it's going to bother me for a while now. You look at these evaluations, and yes, it's great to have those guys. Maxwell Hiller, I think, is a guy that transcends that, but you don't always have that. And that's the only curious clarification that I would throw out there on the 2027 guys. We got guys in the chat talking about, it's safe to say Roa is going to be a Nittany Lion. Not necessarily. There's a long way to go. And
indications are good.
But to be honest with you, if you're a 2027 kid from California committing to Penn State in September of your sophomore year, I guess it is, that's not exactly, I wouldn't label that as great. Like I think it would be, Keemon Spell is one thing because he's right down the road in McKeesport, but to get a 2027 commit this early, especially from that far away, just gives you more time to think about it and more time for other people to tell you how to think about it. And that's really been a tough thing to overcome at times. So yeah, I wouldn't expect a commitment this weekend from those guys, and I wouldn't advise it. But that's just, I'm not the one making those decisions.
Yeah.
Was it Samson Okunlola, Sean? In that class,
I don't know that it was Samson.
There was Zach Evans too. Remember, he went to Clemson. Sorry to cut you off here, T. Frank. But Evans was later on. But Caden Proctor was in that class, but I don't know that we ever really penciled him in for Penn State. Okunlola would be the one I would circle, but I don't know. Anyway,
okay, I don't think it was it either.
Well, I'm going to do something else Fitz doesn't like, which is compare unrealistic expectations to Leighton Von Brandt.
Oh, Evan Link. That's what it was.
Is it Evan Link?
Right.
Okay.
Had to be Evan Link, Sean. Yes.
So watching this film here, and again, if you're listening to the podcast, I always encourage people to check out the at least this particular part of the section, so you can of the show, so you can get an idea of the highlights of these players, and that's why we put this up here, so you can get you can see what Lucas Rowe looks like and Leighton Von Brandt. Watching Leighton Von Brandt here on film, to me, I see from a frame perspective and a skill set of what he's good at early, reminds me a little bit of Nolan Rucci in that he is big and long, he's got a huge frame, but he has a pretty good pad level, and he loves to run block. Devastating run block. I'd say even right now, Nolan Rucci's best strength, despite being 6'8", is his run blocking and his leverage. So I think that's a super interesting skill and trait combination to have from Leighton Von Brandt. And obviously he has to grow and develop, and all those things are the secret sauce to making a good offensive lineman. But I thought that was just an interesting observation from checking out his film so far this year. We got to see him, as you mentioned, up close and personal quite a few times this offseason during camp. I guess, what do you think of him as a player just generally?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. It's going to be one of those ones where you continue to develop physically and you continue to get faster with your feet. Like that is the entire game right there for a guy like that, is to just boost that athleticism, get on that ladder as much as you can, and really improve that agility, because if you're going to play tackle, you're going to need it. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't get ahead of linemen in 2026, let alone 2027. So I don't want to quite do that, except for Kevin Brown, of course, in 2026. So that's a different comparison. But no, I mean, you've got upside there, certainly, with all these guys, Hiller included. I think Hiller's like 27th in the country or something like that. So you certainly see the upside. The national guys have seen the upside with these guys as well. And it's great to be in on them early. It's just got to continue that evaluation, because as I was looking through that 2023 class, Anthony Donko was not on the radar at this point. There were several guys that were not on the radar at this point that maybe ended up being targets, and you see that in 2025 as well. So that's where I would go with that. It is Zach Owens. How about that? No, you just look at different data points from different classes point to there's still a long way to go in that class.
Yeah. And now I'm just playing all the highlights I meant to play earlier. We got Madden Williams. We got Lucas Rowe. We can talk about whomever on the list, but I'm just going to catch up with all these so that fans can check out all of these players we've already talked about. Ryan, coming back to you, is there another player on the list you're interested in highlighting here?
Well, first off, shout out to Beach Wine Guy for reminding me that I said that Penn State will get at least one of Cyrus Williams or Lex Cyrus and Saz Williams. Yes, you were right on that one. I messed up there. Although
one told
behind the scenes. What's that?
What's that, one told him he was coming. I mean,
well, yeah, exactly. That's kind of why until, a school that he didn't take an official visit to offered crazy, stupid money. But anyway, let's move on. I think there's a lot of guys we can go through. I think Jacob Weatherspoon, cornerback prospect out of Ohio, is absolutely one of Terry's top guys. There's no debate, really. I think he's pretty high on the board. Again, I know, let's see how the season plays out, but I really like
looking pretty good so far.
Because any camped at Penn State, like everything stacks up pretty well. The issue, just like it will be with Elbert Hill, who is also a top prospect, is that Ohio State is also very much in the mix with two elite cornerbacks from Ohio. So let's see where things go there. But this will be, I think, Weatherspoon's third visit to Penn State, I want to say. I thought he was here again, we know he camped, and I believe he was here in March as well for a spring practice. So I really like Weatherspoon. I really like his makeup too. Like he really fits the Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State kind of profile, right? Like everything on and off the field makes a lot of sense that he'll end up at one of those schools and probably be successful. Go ahead.
Do we have a sense of is he a safety or a corner? Because obviously the burst of the football and his general size make him look like a corner, but all these highlights are from a safety position. So, Fitz, do you have any indication of, is he a defense? I put athlete on the highlights. Is he an athlete? Is he a corner? Is he safety? Is he a receiver? Or is it just yes, please?
Yeah, I would go with yes.
Okay.
I mean, the kind of skill set that you've got to throw out there, I mean, corner is always valued the highest, I think. But it depends on some of the metrics in terms of how you can move, how you can do that short area quickness and things of that nature.
Ryan, any more thoughts here on Jacob Weatherspoon? He's obviously the guy that we highlighted to start the show, and I just wanted to show here where he ranks. He is the 173rd player according to On3, pretty much a consensus top 200 player, if not 175. Importance of players like this in the class to maybe get some of these wins against Ohio State when you go head to head.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Ohio State recruits so well nationally that like that's to not sound, I mean, not to be disrespectful, but like a lot of when Penn State has landed top players in the region that Ohio State has also gone after, a lot of times it's because they've kind of landed other guys from Florida, Texas, California, wherever it may be, and that's kind of freed up space, I guess you would say, or given that player a reason to maybe consider a different school. But I mean, right now, I would certainly lean towards Ohio State. He just visited twice already this season. We'll be back there for, I'm sure, the Michigan game later in the year. But it's not easy to take the best out of Ohio from Ohio State. They've done it occasionally. Obviously, Aller's the one that everyone will point to. That was a little different in some ways too, because Ohio State didn't offer until well after Aller was already committed to Penn State. But go ahead, Sean. That looked like you had something you want to say there.
3 4-star-ish corners that Penn State's targeting in Ohio this year in Elbert Hill, Jacob Weatherspoon, and Victor Singleton. You'd say they can't take them all, but they probably could. So that's just an interesting dynamic there. Is like, Ohio State's offered all 3 of these kids. They seem to want them, and that's you never really know. Is this a hey, we love you, we want you to come to camp after your junior year and all that kind of stuff? Is that how that offer works? But at the same time, Ohio State doesn't spray offers. Like even in-state kids, I think they've only offered 10, a dozen maybe in the 2026 class. So usually, if they offer them, they want them because that status is such, especially in that state, that matters. So you've got 3 corners that are look to be really good corners in the class of 2026 in Ohio, and we'll see. You don't want to go in with the defeatist mindset that you got to take the scraps, but sometimes that's how it works out.
Well, just off of my ignorant half approach to the film so far for 2026, Jacob Weatherspoon is right near the top of most fun to watch so far. So it would be interesting to see how all that develops. A guy on the that I'm interested in, Nair Graham from Lackawanna. It's been a while since Penn State has really gone to Lackawanna for a player to get somebody. I believe it was Tyrese Mills was the last one. So Fitz, what do we know about Nair Graham?
Nair Graham was a guy with an offer very early in his class. He was from South Jersey. Penn State was trying to make headway in Philly and South Jersey. They offered a bunch of kids, and actually he was one of those kids that like you thought could commit early, but you also kind of thought that he wasn't at that level. And they took some of those kids in 2025 that turned out to be that was the correct evaluation. But went to, I believe he committed to Maryland eventually. Maryland and Syracuse were the 2 big ones. And then he did not make it to Maryland for whatever reason. And now he's at Lackawanna, having a pretty good year. I would say it's going to be interesting to see how Penn State would approach this one. Obviously, there's a need for game ready linebackers. It's tough to sell transfers if you have returning starters, and it looks like they'll have at least one returning starter next year. That was a roadblock for a guy like Jay Sean Barham, who went to Michigan. Is you got most of your linebackers back this year, and you can clearly see that on the depth chart. So is JUCO the way to go to fill that hole? I don't know. We'll see. But he's certainly had a good year for Lackawanna. They trust Lackawanna. They trust Mark Duda up there. They stopped by a couple of weeks ago to check out prospects. I don't know that it's like heavily on the radar right now, but at the same time, you got to look at that depth and figure out your roster structure and see where you're at. Of course, you lose Kevion Keys, and so that leaves a little bit of a hole around that general area in terms of scholarship, in terms of eligibility class and things like that. So I think that's worth noting. I don't know that Penn State's going to move on Graham. I don't know that they have to move on Graham right now, but it's definitely an attention grabber when you talk about Penn State's history with defenders at that school.
How do you categorize that, Ryan? 2025? Do you even consider maybe like a 2024 commit, given the Lackawanna, the JUCO status? I guess because this is a full class in 2025, do you do the computing differently if you're considering taking a linebacker like that?
Not for recruiting site purposes. I mean, technically, when you enroll early, that does roll you back to the previous class. Like, that's kind of how Penn State looks at it, and all these schools look at it, because that's how the rolling over every year of the scholarships and all that kind of stuff. We could go all day on it, but we're going to classify him as 2025. Penn State would technically classify that's if he plays this year out and then we're to enroll in January. Go ahead, Sean.
It depends on his situation in terms of academics. Cause if he was committed to Maryland and end up at Lackawanna, if he's a non-qualifier, he can't be here. Like, I think that's how that would work. So he would have to get his degree and figure that out. I think he might be a 2026 prospect, actually.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't have his transcripts. I did not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know that one. So,
but it is interesting. It is interesting that it can go either way depending on a bunch of factors.
Well, he's had 2 years now. He's had 2 years at LAC. I mean, I would assume. I mean, Jacksonville State just offered the other day. Like, it seems just from like there's 4 or 5 schools supposedly that are like getting close to offering, which would tell me that they think that they could probably get him in January. But again, let's see. I mean, this is pretty early on us investigating Nair Graham. We're kind of only working on that really mostly this morning. But look, 14.5 tackles for loss last year, already up to 6.5 tackles for loss in 4 games. I mean, you saw it in those highlights there. He plays fast and plays physical, and there's always a need for that. Let's just see how things keep progressing, go from there.
And junior college recruiting is different, because sometimes it's just like, hey, we need you to come now. We need you to come after spring or something like that. They offered, of course, Odera Akaka out west, the defensive end. And they're still looking at him, but it's also just kind of a kid glove situation when you try and figure out how the pieces fit in, and then you can press forward faster with that.
Yep.
There was a comment or a question that involves this particular conversation. It's in the orbit of this conversation, asking James Franklin was asked on, I think, Monday about the 105 scholarship limit and how it changes a lot of different things from the perspective of roster management and roster building. And he wasn't a fan of it. And the question in the chat was, were you surprised by that, Fitz?
Not at all, because if you look at the current makeup, there's no structure. There's no telling how this is going to build up, because what you need ideally, if you're going to go to 105 scholarships, great. I don't want to say nobody, but most schools won't use those 105 scholarships, because it is a matter of roster building and sort of doing it the right way and figuring out how you can stack guys at certain positions and how much you need to let up for transfers and how much you need to leave out for potential recruiting classes and things like that. And then, like, if you have this is where I run into it. If you're going to have 105 scholarships, like, there's more than 105 guys that need to be on your roster, because you're not carrying, Penn State travels 6 or 7 specialists. You're not carrying 6 or 7 specialists on scholarship. Like, and I don't think walk-ons are going away. I don't think that's a situation. I think they might be diminished. And I think there's going to be a sort of chain of events where these walk-ons will end up snatching up scholarships, because more top schools are taking scholarships. There's going to be more scholarships available at the bottom, because, top school is going to take a guy that's going to commit it to Temple. Now, all of a sudden, Temple's got to take a guy from Delaware. Delaware's got to take a guy from wherever. It's going to be sort of a chain, like a cause and effect type thing with that. But at the same time, like, I think the ideal situation here, and I said it before on the show, you go 105 guys on an active roster, you get more guys available on a practice reserve squad, and then you can play it like the NFL, where you activate guys, deactivate. Cam Wallace goes down with an injury. All of a sudden, you got to go to somebody on your other squad. And that's the thing. Like, if you go 105 flat rate, like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, you're kind of, okay, you start at 105 and now all of a sudden you lose 4 or 5 guys for the season and you can't replace them. Well, I mean, now you're at a competitive disadvantage. What's Kent State going to do? They're number one, going to struggle to have enough money to cover the scholarships that they're already giving out, because that's a tough place to do that. Number two, you've got to replace those guys if they get hurt. And it's really a tough situation.
To kind of build on that point, not only do you have, and I understand it is, you're trying to model it roughly after the NFL, but there's free agency in the NFL where if somebody, to your point, if somebody gets hurt, you sign another football player. If you cannot sign another football player and you just lose players, that's not how the NFL works at all.
Correct.
Because they have not only the practice squad, but guys that are on the street that are technically a viable option at some level. And you can't do that in college. So I think it is a huge problem in the making, as you point out, if you have a severe rash of injuries in the future.
Yeah, and it's a year-round thing. Like you need to, like, if you need to be on that injury reserve list or whatever, like you need to lift year-round with that team. Like here's your 105 and that's it. That doesn't make any sense. I'm shocked and appalled that the NCAA would not have a clear plan. I mean, it's just, I didn't see that one coming. But it just, there's so many holes in that opportunity that it doesn't make a ton of sense. So it'd be interesting to see which direction it goes. I mean, I like the active, non-active roster type approach. I don't think Penn State would use 105 scholarships every year. I don't think a lot of schools would use 105 scholarships every year, because there's a level here of college football that relies on walk-ons, and for not just for the Rudy moments, but for everything, for practice, for all season long, for lifting, for all that kind of stuff. Like these guys matter, and it might look a little bit different, but I don't see that going away.
So get back to the conversation, the players coming to the game. Ryan, let's finish up one more player interested in this weekend.
Can I add one more thing on 105 real quick? I think a lot of it's about avoiding lawsuits. Have you guys read up on that kind of stuff? I think that's what it's all about. I mean, for example, like I pulled this list up here. Equestrian. I think that's like what we see in the Olympics, right? Where they like jump over the stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
They used to have a 15 scholarship limit. It's now 35. Rowing, but from 20 to 48. Like what, to me, it all is about avoiding Title IX issues, making big limits for all these schools to try and avoid potential lawsuits down the road when money's getting directed. A lot of money, at least, is getting directed to, the sports that pay out or grab
generate revenue
ratings. Right. Exactly. Thank you. So I think that's just the big point of it. At least that's kind of what I've read, or at least behind the scenes, people seem to think that's the whole reason that's happening. That doesn't mean these schools have to. Football will be the most interesting one, as will, I think, basketball will probably maybe use the extra couple of scholarships that they get. But I mean, there's so many of these sports down the ladder that have these massive increases now that just tell me they're about avoiding Title IX situations and stuff like that down the road.
Great.
So the Ryan Snyder Memorial Equestrian Scholarship at Penn State should go live when?
I don't know. I just remember I remember listening to podcasts and them talking about how equestrian like tripled in size or something like that, which was always interesting. We're going back to the list. Yes, let's talk about
one more, and then we got to get to the game preview. We got to talk about the football game.
Oh man, there's a lot of guys here. We talked about.
What about Jaden Jones?
Yeah, Jaden Jones is interesting just because he camped this year. Certainly has good numbers. I think they want to see maybe a little more explosiveness from him. I mean, he's listed as a linebacker, but on 3, I'd have him more as probably a D end down the road. But I think there's a lot there to like. It's only his second or third visit, I believe. So, they're still certainly digging on him. Of course, he's at Millville. Penn State was really interested in Latsier Brooks. Millville produces a lot of talent down there in South Jersey. So I think he's a guy that we will have to monitor. Wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of like a Jaden Lofton who kind of takes off a little bit later. But certainly Penn State's in on him, interested. But I think there's a couple things from the way he camped and measurement wise and stuff like that they still want to kind of see where things progress before I'd have him as someone that's like circleable on the list right now. He's absolutely going to be, a top DN target for them.
All right. Coming up this weekend, it's not just the recruiting. The recruits are here to watch the game. So let's talk about the game. Penn State versus Illinois, 7:30 kickoff. Guys, let's start with some initial thoughts. Ryan, we haven't gotten your thoughts yet on the game so far this week. What do you think as far as how this game plays out, and set the scene for us of what you think is important?
A lot of it, to me, depends on how Penn State plays with their competition, right? We've seen in a hyped up situation, they spend all summer getting ready for West Virginia. They came out and played great. I think this sets up well for that with them being a top 20 team at home. We'll see if it's a whiteout environment and all that. So I think that bodes well. We've seen them against Minnesota in recent years and Iowa in recent years, teams that are kind of that B class of Big Ten programs, and they do really well, especially at home. So I think that sets up good. Last year Penn State really was able to outrush them. All we remember is the 2021 game, right, where Illinois was the rushing machine, but Penn State doubled them in rushing yards last year. I think Illinois has an issue with their interior offensive line, just from reading a little bit more and looking back a little bit, but that'll be the big thing. I know Sean wants to talk about how Zane Durant's going to crush Illinois' interior defensive line this week. But the one thing I'd say is, Bowling Green did kind of give them a blueprint for how to beat Penn State. And, Bielema and their staff will be looking at that closely with a lot of short intermediate passes. And Altmaier has done well in those situations. Mm-hmm. But again, as Sean pointed out earlier, the majority of their passing game has gone through two players so far. Penn State cornerbacks are able to play well. But we'll see who steps up in that safety role. Do you think it'll be Lane? Like, who's going to be that safety filling in this week? What do you guys see at practice?
We saw Lane, but at the same time, I have my thoughts on it's probably going to be Cam Miller that steps in to the Lion and starts with Reed back deep, at least to start. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't start the game on your heels, but you start the game like kind of feeling things out, and you probably want the true freshman on the bench to start, and then comes on the field.
Right. So my also matters. Like, what? Go ahead.
I was going to say it also matters what their personnel package is. So if it's 11 personnel, that's different than if it's 12 personnel. That's different. And Jalen Reed, the whole point of Jalen Reed is he kind of bridges the gap, as James Franklin talked about. He can do both. But if they're going to come out in 12 personnel set, obviously Dom DeLuca has something to say about that. But you would probably want Jalen Reed there, as opposed to if they come out with a slot receiver, Cam Miller might fit that a little bit better and give you the leeway to play around with that.
Mm-hmm. So I think Penn State will control the ball pretty well in this one. Their defensive statistics are pretty strong. But if you look back at that Kansas game, like first off, Kansas rushed for almost 6 yards per carry in that game. They turned the ball over 4 times. If Penn State avoids turnovers, able to rush the ball just like they did last year, I think they're able to keep the ball out of Altmaier's hand a good bit of that game. And, the spread, 18-19, it keeps growing, right? And I think when it came out, everybody was like, man, this seems ridiculously high. I think people know or have a sense that maybe Illinois didn't quite deserve those 2 wins the way it looks like maybe on paper. Obviously, everybody saw that overtime win last Friday, but I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State's able to win this by 20.
Fitz, we got some of your thoughts early in the week. Has anything changed, or have you done any additional research to kind of refine your thoughts from the beginning of the week on Tuesday?
Not really. More down on Nebraska right now after watching that again. They certainly did not help themselves in that situation.
Who I said last week would beat Illinois. Sorry. Another check on the Ryan mistakes. Go on.
Ryan was wrong. Graphic. No, I mean, Penn State, what's Penn State's bread and butter, T. Frank? What have I been saying all year? On offense. Where do they like to get the ball?
To Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren in the flat. Okay, yep. So Penn State should have, theoretically, practice against that play. I think Illinois scored on that twice, maybe 3 times against Nebraska, where they leap that tight end on the flat, the play action, roll them out, hit them in the flat. If Penn State can defend that play, they'll be fine. And I think they'll be able to do that. But it was really funny just seeing it over and over again, and it kept working and working and working. And
it worked with an offensive lineman at one point.
Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating to watch that just keep coming about. So if Penn State can defend things like that and take away those receivers on the outside, they'll be all right. Altmaier's better. Like he is a better quarterback, much better quarterback than people remember from the 4 picks last year. The thing about Altmaier, he's going to get the ball out quick. He's going to get the ball out to the outside. He's going to RPO some stuff. If he does throw over the middle, it will be RPO for the most part. So I think Penn State's second level defense, the linebackers are going to have to be this is the most RPO that they're going to see or that they've seen so far. And I think that they're going to have to be on their toes and figure out how to defend that. And, that's going to go right up the middle of the defense from those 2 box linebackers to the safeties and of course the line position as well. So I think that'll be an interesting dynamic there. But what you got to do, you got to get Altmaier behind. You got to get him to take a drop back instead of a 2-step, 3-step drop and deliver the football. And then you can put some pressure on. And I don't see the Illinois passing attack being one as such, and especially with the offensive line that they have to play from behind. So you get a lead, you feel okay about this. I will say I think it's probably going to be close in the first half, and I'm saying that because I've not said that so far, and that's the way Penn State's been playing. So if I say it in reverse and Penn State all of a sudden is leading 24-0 in the first quarter, you're welcome. But no, it's a situation where I think Penn State's got a lot of advantages. I've mentioned the interior offensive line. I mentioned Zane Durant. I think Penn State's going to have the opportunity to sort of bully in there and have a game. So I'm excited to see what Durant can do, because he was very good in terms of he's been very good this year, even if the stats haven't completely reflected that. And, maybe this is a game where those stats start to come.
Yeah, Larry is pro in the chat. He was curious if we're live. We're always live at 10 a.m. during the weekday. I know that there were some times in the past that we weren't. We are always live now at 10 a.m. So just to clear that up for anyone who is watching this at 10:55, we are going through the game right now for the first time. He says, Ryan, he's going to say the same thing about Kansas outgaining them, turning it over too much in Nebraska, gave Dylan Raiola all day to throw. And I think that's an important thing. I want to chime in here because I'm going to write about something about this with the quarterback comparison and some of the differences that I've seen in the offense and why I'm so high on Drew Aller, where some of the metrics and some of the perception around Luke Altmaier is that he's so much better. So then who has the better quarterback in this game? It's Drew Aller. Mm-hmm. And I just, to echo some of the things that Fitz said, watching the film yesterday and kind of it has to marinate and then it clicks and finally you find what the thing is. Their offense is highly designed and schemed, and I understand that Penn State's is too. So they do a lot of things with scheme to get open throws for Drew Aller, but the difference is he's got reads on those plays. The number of play actions and RPOs and one read, as in we have a half field read, so you can throw it to one or two levels of the defense, but you're not reading the full field. It's incredible how they can be so different. The offenses can be so different. He has been good when he's been asked to go to his next progression or whatever, but it hasn't been in a situation against a defense that has a backbone necessarily. Right. So that's the biggest thing. And I'm going to get into those details later at bluewhiteillustrated.com, but it finally clicked for me yesterday of what I'm watching is all of these plays. James Franklin said Brett Bielema is about running the ball and completions, and they don't allow for a lot of opportunities for Luke Altmaier to not know what to do with the football.
Right.
And when they do, sometimes he freezes and doesn't throw the football. And that's when Abdul Carter and Denine Sutton can pounce.
There was an interesting play, I believe, in the first half where it was a trip stack on the left and a single receiver on the right. His clear number one read was the single receiver on the right, which was a curl that they completely took away. But he was able to come back to the left. And it wasn't a complete field read. It was, there's going to be a guy on your left, basically at the line of scrimmage or a little bit behind, where you just got to go to him. So he went right and he came all the way back left. And it wasn't a true progression, even though it may have looked as if it was that. So this is a very much two-read offense.
And there was another situation where he had that same exact thing and he never looked backside. The front side was covered and I think they got a pass interference on it, but he never looked at the stack. He had open opportunities at the stack. The other one wasn't covered, but he just threw it in. Anyway, quarterbacks, all that stuff, the context around it, that's the thing I go all day about. But we got to get to our predictions because we're going to go a little bit long anyway, and I don't want to keep these guys too much longer past an hour. So now time for our game predictions, Penn State and Illinois. We're going to go through what we think is going to happen in this game. I'll give you the spoiler alert already. I already deleted the Spider-Man meme, but we're all basically in the same ballpark from a score prediction. So Fitz, can you go through what you think is going to happen in this game?
Yeah, I just continue to look at Penn State's record in bigger games. I know we're not labeling this as a premium game on the ticket, but this is a big game. I mean, it's pretty cool to have a ranked Illinois team come in here at night in late September. I always think this is the best opportunity for a whiteout in terms of late September. Makes a lot of sense with the weather and things like that. So to see them turn that into a game like that, I think is really cool. Even if you wanted UCLA to be the original whiteout. But going back to my prediction, which I've clearly remembered and didn't have to pull up right now, I got Penn State 35-16. I'm curious how Penn State's offense continues that expansion that we saw last week. You got Liam Clifford involved. You got Julian Fleming involved. You got a couple of tight ends involved. Luke Reynolds was in there. So how much of that is Kent State? How much of it is Penn State? I think there's a line to be walked there, but I also think that against this defense, there are certain spots where you can excel. Nick Singleton has a spot that you can excel. Trey Wallace on the outside with those outs and those comebacks has a spot where he can excel, and you can extend those drives. You can get more plays that we've talked about before, and you have the opportunity to sort of step on the throat there.
Ryan, what do you think?
34-14, similar. I think they'll maybe just cover. I'm looking for the run game, man. Control the ball. I saw in the chat that Illinois really one of the slower tempos. Well, if they don't if they don't have the ball, they can't really do that a whole lot. So I think Penn State controls it with the ground game. Uses Tyler Warren, uses handful of receivers. Let's see if Amari Evans, see if somebody can get some big splashy plays in here. I wouldn't be shocked if we see one or two. Big chunk plays, maybe a touchdown or two. But I like Aller's ability to control the ball. I like Katron and Nick's ability to, consistently gain ground against an Illinois defense that, again, statistically looks all right. But I just don't know that they're as talented as their stats maybe play it out to be right now. So Penn State covers, gets out of here, looks forward to UCLA in 2 weeks. Big one, USC.
T. Frank, Andy Kotelnicki coached against Illinois last year, and one of the more entertaining watches that we had. How much do you think that is a factor in this one?
It's everything. First off, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. He's already primed the pump for this week. I went back. I watched the game in the context of, well, Illinois is next week, and there are plays that he ran last week, and I can talk about this part freely because it's on film. There are plays from last week that are the exact play, augmented a little bit for the talent at Penn State, that destroyed Illinois last year. So he's already setting the table for what he wants to do this week. And there's so many things we could talk about here that I just
poke the bear.
I want to put like all the things that we're not allowed to talk about from practice. Like, I guess just say this. I am now very confident that Penn State can get their players the football in any situation, as opposed to maybe last year where guys had a deficiency. And so they're like, they just run the offense and succeed or fail based on the offense. So Andy Kotelnicki, his influence on the offense, his adaptability, his evolution week to week is it's it to me, which is why I have them winning 38-17. And I said, okay, so Penn State has scored 34 points in their 2 wins where they weren't necessarily playing great. I think they're playing better. 38 is the baseline for me. I think that Andy Kotelnicki, and I'm giving Illinois the credit of being a good defense and having some elements that can challenge Penn State. Their secondary can be physical. Their defensive line can stop the run a little bit, but I think Penn State's speed and their completeness as an offense is going to overwhelm that for the first time for Illinois this year. One last thing. Somebody asked me on the message board. I'm doing a mailbag today. It's bloated. It's too big already. So I just want to answer this question. Somebody said, Drew Aller, can he perform under pressure? Right now, Drew Aller is completing 58% of his passes for 158 yards and 13 yards of completion under pressure, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, 0 turnover-worthy plays according to PFF. He is balling against pressure. So if Illinois gets pressure in this game, unless it's the devastating kind that he can't avoid, he's taken that step. This is why I'm saying he's a first-round quarterback. He can prove it on Saturday, but that's the sort of play that gets you difference-making, game-defining, elevate your play against good teams' performance. And Aller has proven that so far. You're never proven. You have to continue to do it. But I've seen enough evidence that I trust him in this opportunity to do that. And it'll come down to, are his receivers open? And everything I just said about Andy Kotelnicki, does it come through? So that's what we got for our predictions. That's for the game this week. Of course, we've got more Penn State football talk coming up. We've got the tailgate show coming up at 4:30, the post-game show coming up at 1 o'clock in the morning probably. So please stay up with me, have some caffeine, and we'll talk about the game afterwards. Guys, very quickly to get out of here because I know we're already over time. Ryan, something coming from you on Friday, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. What can people find?
Just breaking down the most intriguing guys of the weekend, right? A couple of the guys we talked about today, a couple of guys we haven't talked about today. That'll be probably our main thing tomorrow. And then just adding to the list, man. It never ends. Every day I feel like we got a new handful of guys we got to keep an eye on. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of additions over the next 24 hours, and then we'll break down the guys that I think Penn State fans really need to be focused on.
Fitz, a highly underrated thing on Friday is our live chat on the message board. Tell people about what that is and why they should join us for half off so they can get in on the chat.
Yeah, you want the juice. That's where it comes. Without the tact of having to put it in an article or something, there's value in what we can say on the message board versus what we can put in articles. And that's a great spot to go to. So definitely check out the live chat on Fridays. Definitely check out all the stuff that we do, the depth chart, the printable depth chart, all that kind of stuff is good stuff to have in your holster for Saturday. Can't wait for a night kick against Illinois. Also, I'm going to a high school game on Friday night. Cannot wait. It's my alma mater. Greencastle Antrim is starting a Sports Hall of Fame. The inaugural class has my father in it. I'm really
that's awesome. I mean, that's awesome. Props.
Yeah. I'm pumped to say it. He was, he's pretty pumped about it. He's still going to, this is how crazy this guy is. We're going to the football game Friday night. We're driving back Friday night. He's tailgating half the day at Penn State, has to miss the game, go back for a reception. I'm going to the Penn State game, of course, but no, so awesome to see this come together. And my dad is my hero, and I'm so freaking proud of him. So
that's cool.
Just had to get that one in there.
I thought we were about to hear about Sean Fitz's high school football career for a second, but never mind.
Sean Fitz's high school football career did not quite match that of Bill Fitz. So you can say that pretty much about everything that he did. He was a state champion high jumper. He high jumped at Penn State in the 70s. So yeah, it's really cool to see that come about. And maybe I'll sneak into a back room or something in that Hall of Fame. But yeah, I'm not getting in first ballot like Bill.
Well, that's an awesome thing. And by the way, congratulate him if you see him on his tailgate on Saturday. That'll do it for today. Of course, our tailgate show comes up at 4:30 outside the Bryce Jordan Center with myself and Landon Tangwall, former Penn State offensive lineman. Join us. Come say hi. I promise you, I will look like a deer in the headlights because I'm doing 1,000 things at once, but I want to say hi. And if I don't have a chance to have a conversation with you, I just want to say thank you in advance for coming in and supporting the show. So that's coming up this weekend. We'll talk to you then.